So we're going to talk about the turning over the house for Pesach.
Good choice of words.
Yeah. We'll focus on the kitchen, but before that, just to go into a little bit a few relevant factors which we started last week. That's relevant for B'dikas Chametz. So, just practically speaking, we mentioned that there's many things to do. You could sell, you could sell the chametz, vatul the chametz, and then you also burn the chametz. So burn the chametz. We mentioned this last week that one should, if one is selling, should leave over some area that you could mekayim the mitzvahs b'dika with, because whatever you sell is not, according to many poskim, you don't have a mitzvah b'dika. It's not your reshus. You're not looking for anything. Even if you find chametz, that chametz is not yours, and the ground underneath it is rented to the guy. So you have to leave an area open that you could do kind of mitzvah b'dika with. I got this last week, I've had maybe 4 or 5 questions, the same question. Well, I'm leaving for Pesach, so I'm selling my house, but someone wants to come and live. They want to do chesed. You want to give them the house to live in. Is that okay? And I hate to be the mean rabbi here, but it's very hard to be okay. Either someone has to clean the house. You can't have it both. You go sell the house, the whole house, and then you go let someone live in it. It doesn't make any sense. So I told him you could do is you could tape off the rooms that you're selling, and the rooms that the hallway and maybe the bedroom, rooms that they need, which is not so hard. You clean it. You just have to look. We'll see in a moment. Just for kazayis and chametz. That's easier. You don't have to clean the kitchen, the dining room. These areas are much easier to clean, and you can do that. And then he said you have to do a b'dika on it. Once it's your house, you have to do a b'dika on it and check it. So you want to know, could they make a shliach? Let the person who's coming said, they'll clean the house. You don't have to worry. We'll get a cleaning lady. We'll clean it. They'll clean the house for you. I don't know if it's the smartest idea, but halachically it's also not the smartest idea, because they don't know where to look. They don't know where you keep the chametz. They don't know your house. You should clean your own house. You should do your own b'dika. And even though you can make a shliach to do a b'dika, but that's if the shliach is going to be tereach, if he's going to work hard and look and do a proper checking. If you cleaned it and it's basically clean and he's just putting 10 dreads and doing a b'dika, okay, you checked it. But if it's something which he has to clean and take care of, it takes a lot of tirch, a lot of work, and you can't really rely that he's going to do it, and you're going to be over it, not him. It's your house. It's your house, and you're over, so it's not the proper thing to do. It's whatever you're going to let people use should be clean, and whatever they're not going to use, you can close off and sell. What you have to get rid of for chametz is to be over by Rabbi Mordechai, you have to have a kazayis of chametz. So shayla about a chatzi shir, but you have to have a kazayis, and even a chatzi shir less than a kazayis if it's something which is in a place where people can eat it. So that also one should check, because you might see it and eat it. You might see a half a cookie and eat it by accident. Get his Pesach. So the b'dika should be, when you're checking the house, you check for any chametz, which is either a kazayis for sure you have to get rid of, and even less if it's something which is a chashash, a person might come to eat it. Places which are dirty, it's places which are under the refrigerator. Even if you don't move the fridge ever, so then it could be it doesn't have tell us to your wife, but it doesn't have you don't have to clean there. I mean, it doesn't have a poilus on top of it. It doesn't get moved. But places which you do move, but it's dirty, so we hold rulings down that chatzi shir is not mitzdarif. If it's not, a person is not going to eat it. The whole chashash is going to come to eat it. So if it's less than a shir, it's less than a kazayis, and it's dirty, so you don't have to worry about that. If it's less than a kazayis and it's clean and whole, so then one should get rid of it. But if it's, let's say, in the floor of the garage, it's a place where you're not going to eat off of it's dirty. So then you just have to look around for a kazayis, a larger piece of food. And that's the chiyuv bedika, as far as that's in the other areas of the house. But when you're talking about the kitchen and the dining room, place where you eat, then you put on the table. So then we'll chayshish even for a mashu of chametz on Pesach. Even a mashu of chametz you're not allowed to eat a smallest amount. We're going to on Pesach, and that's where all the chametz come. Now I will mention that the Shulchan Aruch brings down minhag ligror sak solom. They used to scrape the walls. They would scrape the walls for all the chametz that people touch with their hands. It gets on. So there was a minhag to clean like people clean today. The walls weren't like today where you just cleanly painted. It was a rough wall, so they would just scrape it down. But in other words, what the women do is within the parameters of the minhag of Klal Yisrael to make sure that there's absolutely no zecher of chametz anywhere in the entire house. That's the proper way to do things. But when you're talking about strictly halacha, the halacha is the bedika is to get rid of any chametz that's ve'ein, that's a larger piece, like a zayas or even a chatzis, less than that. If it's even a whole chili or someone might come to eat it. If it's whole, if it's not in a place where it's dirty, so then you're only worried about a kazayis. That's the ikar halacha. I'm not going to get so much more into this. I just wanted to mention it.
I just wanted to clarify. If it's not edible, if it's dirty, if it's whatever. It's
edible.
But I'm saying
it's edible, but you're not going to eat it.
It's more than a kazayis, then it's considered your over, even if it's like in some place where it's dirty.
Because it's edible. It's edible.
It's not edible. If it's edible, it's less than it's a half a kazayis. You say
unless it's nifsal me'achilas kelev, it's usher. That's considered edible in halacha. So if it's a kazayis, then you're over. If it's less than a kazayis, that's something else. If it's less than a kazayis, it's not something. There you're not over. It's just a question if you might come to eat it. So then, if it's something you're not going to eat, then you don't have to do badik on it. But anything which is a kazayis, as long as it's not nifsal me'achilas kelev, that's considered food that has a din chametz and it's usher, and you have to get rid of it. You have to burn it.
I'm in a good position to know that.
You can take it, check it out. The dogs today are much more mephonic. You get good dog food.
Great.
Okay, so that's the basic parameters. But I'd like to go more to the things which are, to the kitchen. There's a few things, interesting halacha things that come up, and kashering, and try to cover the main areas here. So, when we're talking about kashering, turning over the kitchen, so there's a few basic rules. The first rule is that the only thing something has to be kashered is if something hot touched it. Okay, generally speaking. If something which is cold touched it, so then technically you can wash it off and it's mutter to eat. So let's say cups, which are only used for cold, technically you don't have to kasher it. We do something called mila ve'irui, and the cups that are sitting around the house with the chametz, and maybe you had something hot, and maybe there's a chashash that possibly that you're using chametz with it. So we don't generally use the chametz things for Pesach unless you do a mila ve'ira, which is you put it 3 days and soak it in water, switch the water every day for 3 days, you soak it. That's a form of kashering. But halacha, strictly letter of the law, something which is cold is not by leia, so it doesn't go into the wall. So for example, your kitchen table. Okay, a person wants to use his kitchen table. So the kitchen table, you don't usually put something hot directly on the kitchen table. You may put it on a plate. You put a plate which has hot food on it on the kitchen table, but you don't put food directly on the kitchen table. Now, avada, so there shouldn't be a problem of milchus and fleishiks either. You could use the same table. What's the problem? You're not putting anything hot down. But the minhag is to cover the table, because maybe something, maybe you didn't clean it well, maybe something fell on the table. So even, let's say you have a milchig table, you want to eat fleishiks, everyone puts out a tablecloth on top of it, and that's the proper thing to do. Even though strictly halacha, there may not be an issue, because if you don't put anything hot directly on the table, so the table never became milchiks. Milk may have spilled, so you wiped it off. but definitely it might not have become milchik. So technically, if it's cold, cold doesn't go into the table. As long as you wash off the surface, you're okay. Avad as a chumrah, also because it could be something spilled, your macaroni and cheese spilled onto the table and made it milk. It could happen, but so we always designate it as one and we cover. The same thing is with chametz, and even more so, because the chametz we said is also b'mashu. That means even if the smallest amount fell on from the flour, a little bit got on the table. So then you eat that little bit, it goes onto your food. So it's b'mashu, you over isser by eating it. So therefore we're very machmir to cover the tops. We cover it, even though technically all you have to do is wash it, especially the smooth ones. It's not like the old days where the tables were rough. They were made out of wood and they were rough and they had grooves in it. It was much harder to clean. Today the glass tops or whatever you have are very smooth and you can wash it down, and there's really no chashash of chametz if it's washed well. But the proper way to do is to so again, it's me'ikar adin. If it's washed, it's okay. It's washed. You washed it, but the proper thing to do is to cover it, because something used all year for chametz, you never know. Maybe there's a drop that was missed, and also chumrah, so you cover it, and then there's really no issues, because again, it wasn't used for hot. As far as the countertops are things where you may have put hot food on, so there's a problem, because if you put hot food down on the countertop, and then you're going to put something on Pesach hot down, so the blias, went in from the hot food into if you put your challah, for example, to put the hot challah from the oven directly on the countertop, so now something from that challah may have gone in a little bit into the countertop, and now if you put something down on Pesach, it'll pull it back out. It'll pull it back out and go into your food and eat it. So if it's hot. If it's hot. It has to be hot. If it's cold, it doesn't transfer.
But why does the same principle apply that you put to the table? I mean, I'm putting actual food on the counter.
So, if there's no... So a countertop is a place that's used for cooking, and so even though normally you don't put, especially for micro ones, you're going to put something too hot, it's going to burn. Normally you don't put down, but it does happen. You put the challah down, it happens that things get put down on top of the countertop. It's in the middle of the cooking, you move something over, things spill on it. It happens. It's hard to say that it's chametz free, and you could just wash it off and use it, because it's in the process of cooking, things spill, things don't, and you put things down. It happens. You put things down on the countertops throughout the year. Now I want to just build up and have an understanding of concepts here, which maybe would make it mutter. I'm not saying to use a countertop without covering it or kashering it. I'm just strictly halacha here. There's two concepts. There's one concept which is dry food doesn't transfer. In other words, if I have two pots, okay, a fleishiger pot and a milchiger pot, okay, and I touch them next to each other, and they're both burning hot. They touch each other. Food doesn't transfer from inside the milchiger pot into the fleishiger pot, or vice versa. Food can only transfer with heat via, you have to have a conduit, you have to have liquid. You have to have liquid that's going to transfer the food from one pot to the other. But if the pots are dry, there's no pots, the outer surface is dry, and they're touching each other, nothing's going to go, it's not going to go from one to the other without a liquid thing to move it. Now if I put food onto a pot, that's different, because the food is not inside a pot, it's direct. If I touch challah to a pot, that pot will become chametzik. But if I have two pots and I touch each other, so then it's not going to transfer one to the next without any liquid. So technically, if I have my countertop and I use a kli, I put any, whenever I put something down on the pot, I put a hot pot onto the countertop. So who cares I put a hot pot on the countertop? Nothing's going to go from the pot into the countertop, or vice versa, unless you have liquid in between. So that's one concept. And even though that's the case, again, it may happen where food was put directly on the countertop, or two, it may have been wet a little bit from the sink, from the spills. It could be a little wet underneath, and then if there's any water underneath, then it could transfer back and forth. So the same thing as on Pesach. If I take my Pesach thing, a pot that has soup in it, and I put it down on the countertop directly, technically nothing's going to transfer in. But again, maybe this spills, maybe this it's a little wet on the bottom of the pot, and then things could transfer over. So therefore, it's always best to have it covered, when the countertop is covered, so then you avoid this issue. Now, of course, one could argue, well, if it's covered, you may have spillage, which happens all the time. You put a plastic cover on the countertop, and then underneath, from the sink, water gets in. Water gets underneath. And water gets underneath, there you put something on top, and if you have water, it could go through.
Yeah.
Halachically, we consider it could go through. As long as it's water, it goes through many layers. But, okay, that's a chomer, because usually it won't be so hot underneath already. The water underneath is not going to be so hot. The pot is hot. The pot is hot, and maybe the water under the pot is hot, so it makes the countertop with the plastic I put on. But then under the plastic, there's more water, enough to ikra din. That's okay. So if you put a thicker plastic or something on top of the counter, so generally speaking, okay, the counter should be clean. Shouldn't be any chums left on it, and you cover it, you're okay. There are those that are machmer to kasher the counters. With Iwi, it's not so easy to do. So, you know what you're doing.
How does bittul fit into this whole cheshbon?
So that's the second thing. How does bittul fit in? So, again, there's another two things. There's normally during the year, someone calls me up and the piece of chicken fell on top of the countertop. So he uses it to milk like a countertop. Is that piece of chicken treif? Okay, so what's the halacha? So the halacha is as follows: that if the countertop didn't have hot milk on it within the last 24 hours, so it's called noisen tam lefkam, right? The tam, the taste that's coming out of the countertop is pogum, because it wasn't for 24 hours. Blias over 24 hours becomes distasteful, and therefore it becomes bottled in the chicken. So even if you may have some milk in the chicken now through the countertop, but since it was from 24 hours ago, so it's nice time of it becomes bottled and I can eat the chicken. There's another aspect that maybe there's only a mashu, there's only a small amount depending on what it was used for before. It was only a small amount. But on Pesach we're machmir on a mashu of chametz, and we're also machmir on a nice tam of gam. We're machmir, it's a machloikis in Shulchan Aruch, it's tam of gam, it's mutter also on Pesach. And we're machmir even old chametz, blias from the pot that was used more than 24 hours again, is usher on Pesach. So therefore we have, now again, it's a machloikis, so there's we'll see soon, but upon him, that's why we l'chatchila go ahead and we cover everything that we shouldn't have the issue.
Even the chametz that you're saying is absorbed into the counter was old chametz, and it's now
Less than tam of gam.
We're still worried about that.
We're still worried about that because of mashu chametz is also. And I'm not going to get into the halach reasons why we're worried about this tam of gam, because it's not nifsal me'achilus kelev really. It's still edible. It's just a small amount, so it's still considered chametz. And whenever mashu is also, we ask even this tam of gam because you can't bottle whatever. It's already beyond the scope of this conversation.
Are you going to talk about granite?
Yeah.
At some point?
Yeah. So granite, marble top, or granite, and all these things could be kashered. They could be kashered. So certain countertops cannot necessarily be kashered. For mica, it's questionable whether you could kasher it. So even if you kasher it, one has to cover it. But marble, granite could be kashered.
Caesar stone.
It could be kashered. You could kasher it. It's not advisable to kasher most of these countertops too often, because it's glazed, and that glaze could be ruined. So
so only with granite.
If you have a warranty, how it works, but
it's only with granite. Caesar stone actually doesn't have.
Caesar stone maybe doesn't have. You have to check out each one how it works. They may not have on top, but it might be sealed inside.
It's buffed.
Yeah. So you have to know how it works, but you have to know if it's advisable to kasher this too often, but they could be kashered. How are they going to be kashered? Now this is an important thing to understand. How do you kasher something? So there's 4 ways of kashering, practical ways of kashering that we have today. Okay? The highest level of kashering is called a libun, which you call the blowtorch. Okay, you make it so hot till it's white hot. Libun is a libun. You're making it till it actually sparks come out of it, so to say. Because it's very hot. It's a very high. The way to do that is either with a blowtorch or with coals. You put coals on it, and then Dutch places they put coals in the ovens. They put coals in there, hot coals.
Self-cleaning oven equivalent.
And a self-cleaning oven is equivalent to a libun. If it's left on for a minimum of 2 hours, preferably should be left on to be 4 hours. A self-cleaning oven, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that. A self-cleaning oven has that heat of libun, but that's the highest level of kasher. The second level is called a libun kal, which we'll discuss. We'll put on the side for now. A light libun. We'll get back to that. The Chazal say like this: Kol davar that comes be'esh, that you use with a fire, you have to get out the treifus with a fire. So something which is used on the fire, the only way to get rid of the things in it is with fire, to burn it out. So for example, the grates on top of the oven, if something spilled on it, it got in with, it was hot with a fire, or the oven inside the oven, the grates itself, the trays, yeah. So these things that I used, that the heat that got the food into it, the isser into it, the chametz, whatever got into it, is through fire. You got to get out through fire. Kol davar she'yover b'mayim, something came with mayim, a pot we consider with mayim. The pot has cooked food in it, and you fill it up with water or whatever, soup or whatever you put in there. So that's b'mayim. So that you could be magal with mayim. You can fill up the pot with water again and cook it, and the food will come out into the water. Okay. It's being heated. Everything's being heated by fire, but it's the way it gets into the walls of the pot is through water. That's called. That comes by mayim, and there you could kasher through a water process. It's called hagolah. Okay, the real good kishmaka way to do hagolah is to come here when they see how it does it. They have a big vat, and you dip your pot in there. That's hagolah. But you don't have to do that. You could do it at home. You could fill up your pot with water, boil it out, and then when it's bubbling all the way to the top, you have to. The problem is like this, and you only do the inside. You have to make the water spill over the top. So to make the water spill over the top, you have to take something and insert it into the pot, which causes the water to spill over. So, but that thing that you're putting in the pot has to be hot, because if it's cold, it's gonna, when you dip it in, it's gonna take away the heat of the water. So you have to have something that's hot that you dip in. So there's 2 ways to do it. One way, the halachic way, is called an even melubin. You take a rock, and you put it on the flame. You put it on the the burner, yeah, and don't hold it with your hand, it gets hot. Take it with a, what do they call it, tongues, and you dip it in, and when you dip it in, it spills over, your pot is kashered. Okay, you fill up, you make sure the pot's clean before. Everything's clean. The kashering only works with the stuff that are in the walls of the pot. It doesn't help for anything which is be'ain, which is on the side or in the crevices. It has to be perfectly clean. You put it in, you dip it in, that's hagolah, it flows over, you kashered your pot. Okay, this is hagolah. You could put your forks, your knives, as long as they're clean, your spoons, you can put them in the pot and it kashers it. You don't have to come here to do it. You could do it at home. As long as you have patience and time. It takes time to heat up a big pot of water. It takes a long time till it heats up on the fire. So that's called hagolah.
If you want a hagolah utensil, pot, should the pot be a pesach pot to begin with?
So if you want to be magal, put, let's say, something inside the pot, right? So the pot, so the rule is like this, that you could use a chametz pot, but you have to kasher the pot first. So what you do is you take the big chametz pot and you clean it and you fill it up with water, like you said, wait till it boils, put something in, it spills over, your pot is kashered. You pour out the water, you refill it up with water, wait another half hour till it boils, and then you can put things into that pot, and then you kasher that. Now, if you're going to use a pesach pot to do hagolah with, so then after you finish kashering everything you kasher with that pot, you have to kasher the pot over. It's only a chumrah, but that's how we're knowing to do. It's not mikra adin for various reasons, but it's only a chumrah that whatever you use a pesach pot, and you kasher everything with that pot, and afterwards you fill up the pot, and you spill it over, and the pot is back to
why is it that
good.
Why is it that if we've kashered a chametz pot and it's now kashered, right, that you have to pour that water out? If it's all kosher at this point.
Because the water picked up from the chametz. Again, it's only a chumrah. It's not make adin. It's only a chumrah. And then you rinse it out with cold water, and then you fill it up again and do it.
So in the first case, you would have to do it again as
Both
well?
times.
Yeah.
Both times.
Both times.
Both times.
Before and after.
What's the
Yeah.
difference between each thing you put into the pot?
You rinse it out with cold water. Then no. Each thing you put in the pot, you don't have to do it. You can do a lot of things in that pot because it becomes bottled. It's nice. I'm afghan if it's not a ben yoimei. I don't want to get into all the practical. If you're doing it, I don't want you to come to me. I'll explain to you how to do it. But just want to give the basic understanding because we don't have all that much time.
So why could you do the knives and forks through water? You see water through water, fire through fire.
Yeah.
So you've got knives and forks.
Right.
How does that relate to water?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So knives and forks are usually not used on the fire itself. They're used in a cooked food. In other words, if I take a piece of steak and I eat it, I cut it with my knife and fork. So it doesn't come in direct contact with the fire. Something which is used on the fire itself, on a barbecue, I use something to stoke it, something used on the fire, that's called, I need a fire to get rid of it. But anything which is secondary already, which is not used on the fire itself, so that I could do hagolah with. Okay, now a frying pan, we'll get to chametz if we have time, but a frying pan is something which is a question if that's called used on the fire, used with water, because it's only used a little oil on the bottom, and you fry with it. That's the question of the frying pan, if you could kasher it with hagolah, or it needs liblin.
Sorry, what? The tongs that you use to pick up the stone, what status do they have?
You shouldn't use chametz. If you use it for chametz, if you use it for chametz, I would have a separate one for the kasher. I have a separate one for kasher.
Pesach tongs.
Yeah, I use just for kasher.
You don't have Pesach tongs?
By the way, the camera gets you. You're completely in there.
Okay, so the relevance for us is like this: when you're kashering the countertop, there's something which are cooked on a fire that needs hagolah. Now there's something called irui klirishim, something which wasn't used directly. You didn't cook a chametz stick of pot. You cooked your barley in it. It's chametz. The countertop, you didn't cook on the countertop. You took from your pot and maybe you poured on the countertop. Okay, so it's called irui. Irui is or your sink. Let's say your sink. Had your sink at chametz? You don't cook in the sink. What happens is you pour things into the sink, or when you turn on the hot water, when boiling hot water comes out, you may have something in there. So the water is heated in the boiler, and it comes out. It's being poured out. So that's called irui klirishim. It's no longer the water when it's hot is no longer on the fire. It's already removed from the fire. It's being poured off the fire. That's called irui. So it's one step down. So the rule of thumb is kebarle kachpolte. The same type of heat that made the thing treif is the same type of heat that could clean it out. So something which became also through irui could get a kashering through irui. So therefore the sink, for example, which any chametz that's in there was only through being poured, or hot water was poured on chametz that was in the sink. So that's called irui. So I could clean it through pouring boiling. I could fill up my pot with boiling hot water and pour it over the sink, a metal sink, and I kasher the sink through a process of irui. Understand? Because I didn't cook in the sink. I cooked in a pot, and I'm pouring it in. So it's one step down. It's irui, so I could kasher it via the same way. Now the kunz here is what makes it very difficult to do it is that if I have a sink, this is the wall of my sink, and I'm pouring my boiling hot, I fill up a kettle of water, I boil it hot, and I pour it over the sink. The direct contact, when it hits the sink, that kashered. But what flowed down afterwards, that already has a status of a klisheni. That's not considered irui. The irui is direct contact. In other words, if I take one cup and I pour it into a second cup, this was cooked on the fire, and I pour it into the next cup. When it hits directly, that's pouring from the first cup. After it hits and it settles in the cup, then it has a din of a klisheni. It's already a secondary cup. The heat of a klisheni is significantly lower halachically. So therefore, only what hits directly is considered an iri and makes it a kasher. Anything past that is a klisheni. This rule works l'chomra on Pesach because when I want a kasher, I have to get every spot. It works the kula all year. If something falls in the sink, I have a question: did it fall on the exact spot where I had chametz, or I had my, let's say something milchix falls in a meat sink? Did it fall on the exact spot where my meat was, or was it a klisheni already? A klisheni is not going to make it awesome. So that's if you have a shiloh on your sink, yeah, you ask a shiloh, but this comes irrelevant. But when it comes to kashering, you want to get every spot. So you have to take. What you really have to do, practically speaking, is when your pot is boiling on the fire, take another pot, okay? Take another pot, scoop it out, dip it in, a small pot, dip it into the big pot, wait a minute until it boils, because the pot itself has to get hot. So give the pot itself a status of a klivishin, so that you leave the pot in there for a minute or so till it gets nice and hot, and then you take it out, and you slowly go from bottom up, and you pour, bottom up, and it takes time. You want to kasher your sink, it takes time. You fill it up again and go from bottom up. Okay, and you put your pot in, wait till it boils a little bit, fill it up, and you go bottom up until you get every area of the sink. Now there's another thing which helps. There's another thing which helps, which works for the bottom of the sink more than the sides, a little harder to do. Is our what?
Can you do it with the faucet?
No, you can do it with the faucet. It's not hot enough. It doesn't get hot enough. Even though kapola kachpota.
If the hottest water that was in the sink was from
the faucet, then maybe that could use. Yeah, it could be, but it could be other
spray
things.
thing that you could do from the faucet.
Yeah.
Would that?
It doesn't get hot enough for it to be called a ira for kasher.
I mean, if you
Does it get hot enough to make it?
Kapola kachpota.
Yeah.
But then you strain noodles.
It doesn't always add up to Kabbalah Kachpota. I don't get into all the details.
As soon as you would strain noodles in your sink, you have.
Or if you let's say you strain noodles, you'll have
I'm saying if the hottest thing.
That's all you did. Yeah. There was a logic to what you're saying, halachically, but we're usually machmul when they're doing ira to have a problem. Now.
Can't use a kettle to pour in the sink.
So you can use the kettle. If you boil up the kettle, then you pour it but it has a very small spout, so you're going to get very small area at a time. But you can use the kettle. Now,
if you cover it, you stick with aluminum foil, it's all or nothing, or can you do chatzi? You can cover the walls and
okay, we'll get to covering them both. Let me just finish the thought here. So there's a way to do it which helps, which I use, which use our rock. Our Evan Malubin, you get a few rocks about the size of your fist, a little smaller. You put it on the burners. You wait till it gets hot. Use the tongues, and after you pour water in the sink,
Move the rock around.
You put a rock in, and you move it around the bottom of the sink. So the rock is hot, and you'll see here sizzle. It actually makes it back. Makes it back to the level of an earring, and you could kash it much easier. Then you take the tongue and move it around the bottom of the sink. And there's another reason to do that also, is because the crevice by the drain, the crevice over there, you can't really, Hagolah might not work there, but if you put the rock there, that burns it out.
You're doing this in conjunction with the water.
Yeah. You fill up the bottom of the sink with water, and then you move the rock around. This way you get every spot. You don't have to sit there and pour over every spot on the bottom. It'll take you all day.
So you're doing the Hagala, and then
empty your pot into the sink.
But by the time the first drip that goes down is the Kli Rishon, and the next is Kli Sheni.
So then you put the rock in, and you move the rock around the bottom of the sink.
Even though you've got mostly Kli Sheni water,
that'll
the rock
brings
it back up.
Yeah.
But you don't put much water in the bottom, right? Just enough to touch
That's
the
just
surface.
Cover the bottom. You have to cover.
You don't want it deep, because it'll cool the rock off.
It doesn't matter.
Then the problem is you're alignment with the sink.
Yeah.
You have to be careful.
Now.
You don't melt the rock.
Right.
Some sinks have a lining on the bottom, spray on the bottom.
Yeah, I don't take any. I'm not insured. Okay, now this comes back to the countertop. Is the same issue. The countertop, if you want a kasher, you have to get every spot. You have to get every spot. So therefore, I don't know. Many people kasher it, but it's probably preferable to cover it, because to get every spot is quite difficult. You have to know what you're doing. They have the steam cleaners, the steam things, which are, it's a question of steam works. If you put a little water on the bottom, you can use steam, or you have to try to make sure to get every spot of your countertop, which would be okay for an e-ring. Now,
if you cover it, don't you have to clean it?
You have to clean it, but you don't have to kasher it if you cover it.
You just clean it without...
You clean it
boiling
well.
water over it.
You clean it very well with things that, cleaners. And then you cover it properly. It's covered, you're okay. If you want to kasher, you can kasher it. These things could be kashered, but you have to take the time. Don't be rushed and do it well. You can kasher it.
What about this whole business about using heavy chemicals? You're never going to eat off it. It's going to pull everything out like a...
Heavy chemicals works to clean the surface, but the blias inside for heat doesn't help you. So that's what you need to do. Okay, so now as far as covering the sink, if you kasher it, technically you don't, if it's a metal sink, you don't have to cover it. Covering a sink itself is look, those that do it is okay. You use use these things, contact paper maybe works. You should try to do some kind of kashering anyways.
You don't have to cover it, you said?
What?
What do you say about a metal sink?
If you kasher it, you're okay. You don't have to cover it.
Yeah. So, but the reason I was asking is you see because the walls are so complicated to kasher.
Yeah, it's good. It's definitely a hitter to cover the sinks. If you're not sure if you did a good job kashering, you cover it. It's not so easy to cover these things. Okay, I want to get to the ovens
what's
here.
preferable? Would you rather us work hard to kasher the sink, or just?
I want you to work hard. That's for sure.
There's no doubt about that. But what is ideal?
Kashering is good for you. Learn how to kasher.
You can't be free until you're enslaved.
You'll eat in my kitchen if I kasher the sink.
He'll visit you.
No answer. Taking the fifth. Look at that.
Okay, the ovens. The ovens have been, with the changing technology, we have all kinds of ovens. There's problems. So I'm going to try to give you a little background and explain practically the ovens today, and we'll end it with that. If we have time, we'll get into the teeth, false teeth. Okay.
Wow.
So kashering the oven. Kashering the ovens is if you have a self-clean oven, we said that self-clean oven does a full complete libun and the inside of the oven, and you're okay with that. One shouldn't place anything on the door because it's questionable if the door contains the same heat. So don't put anything directly on the door on Pesach. But the self-clean oven, when you put on a self-clean oven,
I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? You don't put anything in the door?
When you open the door, you don't put food directly down on top of the door because the door may not get a complete...
During...
Yeah.
After you self-cleaned it, don't use the door for
don't use the door. Yeah, as a table, yeah.
You shouldn't anyway.
But you could kasher the self-clean oven, you could turn it on and kasher. Those that don't have a self-clean oven, there was a big shiloh, a big machlokes of Moshe and Rav Aaron about kashering it. Moshe held that you can't kasher an oven. Now I'm just going to give a slight background here. There's something called a libun kal. Now a libun kal means that it works in the place of hagolah. In other words, something which hagolah could work on, you could use water to clean it out. Certain things are not so easy to use water. Like an oven might not be easy to do hagolah on. So there's something called libun kal, which is a lighter heat of libun, which is you make something hot enough that if something touches the outer surface, it will burn. Because if you take a straw and touch it to the outer surface, it will actually burn. This happens, or today it'll sizzle. If you spritz something on it, it will sizzle. That's hot enough to be called a libun kal, a light form of libun. Now there are some Rishonim that hold the libun kal is good enough for everything, so we'll pile that on. And then others hold that only works for things. Most Rishonim hold that only works for things which hagolah could work, so a libun kal could work. So now we have a problem in the inside of the oven, which you can't do a complete libun. You can't put coals in there. It's not practical. You can't do blowtorch. People that try to do a blowtorch may destroy their oven. And if they don't destroy their oven, they probably didn't do a proper job. Because the blowtorch has to go on each 8 square inches for 7 minutes.
Wow.
In order that it should be a proper libun. And if they just go like this, they didn't do nothing. So anyone, if you want to do a blowtorch, you have to get someone who's experienced and knows what he's doing. And I wouldn't trust the oven's going to work afterwards.
If your oven's still working afterwards, you didn't do a good job.
I'm just saying that you have to know what you're doing. It's not so easy. In the industrial ovens, they do it, but sometimes they ruin it. They get them to sign a disclaimer. But to do it as a practice, it's not very practical. So if you have a self-clean oven, you're okay. If you don't, how are you going to get a libun? The oven needs a libun. Why does an oven need a libun? Because the things were cooked al eish. Same thing is this top of the stove. Today, the grates on the stove, or the burners themselves, that could have a libun. You have fire going, you can make a libun. But glass tops, let's say you have glass top ovens, so the place where the fire gets hot, that has a proper libun. That gets red hot. That has a libun. But all the other areas of the oven doesn't have a real libun. So the question is, how do I kasher it for Pesach? In other words, when I put a pot on my glass top oven, the pot is usually larger than the size of the fire itself, the safety. And then, let's say something goes in between, and falls in between. Is it possible to kasher it because it won't have a proper libun, A? And what do you need to kasher it? What kind of kli is it? So there's a question like this. We know glass. Glass is a machloikis, three-way machloikis about glass, kashering it. One shita holds, and many Sfardim, hold that glass is shia, it doesn't absorb. Glass does not absorb. So glass, you could use hot chametz in it, and then use hot pesach in it. There's no chilik because it doesn't absorb any blias. It's fine. That's one shita in the Rishonim. The other shita in the Rishonim is just the opposite. That glass absorbs, and it has the status of a kli cheres. And a kli cheres, we know you cannot kasher. The only way to kasher it is with libun, with a blowtorch. So kli cheres can't be kashered. And the third opinion is the middle one, which is glass could be by leia, it could absorb, but you could kasher it. You could do hagola and kasher it. So there are three opinions of glass. We're noyeg, Ashkenazim are noyeg, that glass, like the second opinion, that glass is we don't generally kasher it unless there's another thing to be saimach on, unless there's another kula. But generally speaking, especially with Pesach, we don't kasher glass unless you have another heter. It wasn't used for something hot. There's other heterim that could be a tziruf used for glass. So now there's two questions. The enamel that's inside, if it's a metal oven, I don't know if it's a metal oven that you can kasher, metal could be kashered. But if it's a klicheres, enamel ovens are klicheres, so there you need a real libun to kasher. How the food get into the walls of the oven? It used to be you put your bread on the side of the oven. Today you don't do that. You cook in a pot, you cook in a pan. It gets in through zayah, through the smoke. So through the smoke, possibly that's like cooking. And if that's like cooking, I could technically do maybe hagola on the side of the oven. And if I could do hagola, then I could do a libun kal. I could do a light libun, which if I put my oven to the highest degree, that could possibly be a libun kal. So Rabbi Aaron Kotler held you could do a libun kal oven. You clean it well, it's easy off, make sure there's nothing left, and then turn the oven on the highest, and you could do a libun kal because it only gets in through smoke, hagola, and you could do a libun kal on it, which would get rid of it.
There's always splashing stuff. It's not just
there is splashing stuff, but you have to remember when I cook something in there, I'm not eating anything that's falling directly on. I'm cooking in a pot, so it has to come back through zayah, A, and B, whatever splashes on usually gets burnt up. So we're not chayshiv with that, and that's the cooler. That's one of the coolers to be used to burn it up. The problem with that is that since it has the status of a klicheres inside of an oven. Klicheres, it doesn't work a libun kal, maybe you need a libun chomer. So Moshe held that there's no way to kasher prab for Pesach an oven. There are ways to do it for other things, but for Pesach there's no way to really kasher it. Oven insert should be used. And Rabbi Aaron Kotler held that no, you can be saimach on this libun kal. I'm not sure how I got out of this issue, but he holds you can be saimach on the libun kal.
Are you talking about self-cleaning or not with it?
Not a self-cleaning. Self-cleaning you can use.
Even according to Rabbi Moshe.
Even according to Moshe, self-cleaning you can use. But Moshe held the heat of an oven, even when you turn it to the highest, maybe doesn't make a libun kal. There's a lot of issues he has with it. Rabbi Aaron held, all the Talmidei Rabbi Aaron, Lakewood and other places, they held that b'diavad you could do a libun kal on the oven if it's well cleaned. But again, the racks, if you could, you should give to your neighbor that has a self-clean oven and let the racks be put into a self-clean oven, because the racks you put things directly on, that's a little more chomer. If not, you should at least cover the racks and not put anything, cover it with aluminum and then put a pan on top. Now, as far as the oven top, the stove top, so if it's a glass, so that's a question. Is that a status of a glass or is that a status of a klicheres? What status does this have? So there is a kula based on this. This is Aruch HaShulchan actually. Aruch HaShulchan says that
what's a kli cheres again, Rabbi?
A kli cheres is a clay. It's a type of earthenware, yeah. So he says like this. He says that liben kal hayois, that according to some Rishonim liben kal works. So there's a concept by Chometz which is called hatera bola. This is a big machlokas in the Rishonim. I'll just give you the concept. I don't have so much time here, but overtime. I'll just give you the quick concept. There's a difference if chazer, something that's also goes into the walls of my pot, or something which is mutter goes into the walls of my pot, which is going to become also later. For example, basar and cholov, meat and milk. If milk goes into the walls of my pot, and then I cook my pot with fleishiks, so the milk was mutter until it met up with the meat. So that's called hatera bola. So if I have a milk in a pot, so it's much easier to kasher. There are some kulas that are involved because there's no isser in my pot. It's just milk, which has the status of heter. And therefore, if I water it down, before it becomes usser, it'll become too weak to become usser. Masha'enkein, if I have isser in the pot, so even if I water down isser is still usser. But if I have heter in the pot, and then I water it down, and then it comes out, so that heter, since it was watered down, so even a kli cheres, there's a kula, there's a bala'ita, there's a rashba, that even a kli cheres that had milk in it, if I cooked with it, or I did hagolah with it 3 times, and then I cooked meat with it, even though a kli cheres can't be clean, but since the milk got watered down to a degree, so it's not going to become usher when it hooks up with the meat. There's a concept of a terebola, and this concept, the Aruch HaShulchan says that even though it's a machloek, chometz is a shayla. Chometz before Pesach. Is that called hetera or is that called isser? It's mutter, it's chometz, and only becomes usher on Pesach. Or is it called isur bola because it's the same chometz? It's just today it's mutter and tomorrow it's usher, but there's no change that happens to the food itself. There's a question on the Rishonim: do we consider chometz a hetera bola or isur bola? And we could use that as a tzira for a heter. So therefore, if chometz is called hetera bola, so then if you do a libun kal on the kli cheres, so that could be enough to shvachen, to weaken the isser, and then it won't go on asa my food when I use it. So the Aruch HaShulchan uses this. He says, like a frying pan. A frying pan is a question if you do libun agola. He says, or if it has cracks in it, different questions. Dai libun kal, you can use a light libun because of this concept of a terebola. So if you have a suffix, so we could add this on to our shaila. You have a glass top. It's a suffix if it's kli cheres. The glass top is not clear if it's glass or it's a kli cheres, what it is. It's a suffix if it's glass. So it's a suffix if it has the din of a kli cheres. So possibly a libun kal would be enough for chametz, for Pesach. Added that to a few other kulas. There's the Mishabur brings out that on Pesach it can be soimach on the sholtas with shishim. There are other, if you have a tzad with tzarif, and then there's other kulas possibly to be used. Maybe it's dry. What's dry doesn't transfer the heat. We're not sure if it's wet, spillage. You don't know. You don't know in the middle of the glass top if the exact spot where you touched there was a chametz in there that's going to come out if my Pesach thing touches it. If it was transferred chametz in there, nothing here is vaday chametz. So therefore, there is a kula that one could be soimach to do a libun kal on the rest of the glass top. So how does that work?
That's if you're calling it glass, or if you say it's a clear ceramic.
It's a question if it's glass or a cheres. It's a suffix in halacha.
Manufacturers call it a clear ceramic.
I know, but in halacha it could have the din of shia. It could have the din of smooth, like a schulchet. So it's a suffix in halacha how we view the glass top. So therefore, if you look at different kashrus organizations, they give different ideas how to get around this problem with a glass top. So the best thing to do is to leave, even though kasher the place of the oven, the place where the burner is itself, it's enough to leave it on for 10 minutes. but you want to make the areas next to it hot enough to have a liban kal. So if you leave all the burners on for a while, a half hour, you leave it on, you leave it running, that will cause, you see, because spritz water, you see it'll sizzle, cause many of the areas around the burner to get quite hot, a liban kal, and then
30 minutes is the commonly agreed time.
30 minutes, 40 minutes. So leave it on. Leave it on.
Do you leave wide pots on top of it, water?
You don't have to. You could. It's a good idea to leave wide pots to spread the heat. It's a good idea. You burn up hot pots, and then you leave it going, and that'll be enough to make a liban kal that you can be soymach to use it on Pesach. One should cover the areas that are totally off the burner with aluminum foil, just as a header. So you put something on, at least it's on the aluminum foil or something. Rav Heinemann says that to get around this issue of the area around the burners, which you put your pot down and the pot is bigger than the burner itself, he says, well, you can lift it up with a piece of metal. Lift it up with a piece of metal. That's a chumr if someone wants to be machmir, to lift it up with a piece of metal. But if you do this, and you have, if you put a little ring, a metal ring, on the burner, you raise the pot so the pot's never going to touch the bottom. So in other words, there's like an inch or so of the area outside where the pot is bigger than the burner itself, which only has a liban kal. So if you want to be machmer, you can put that on. If you don't want to be machmer, don't put it on. But you get a liban kal by doing this, and a liban kal with these kulas could be sufficient. Because it's a little hard to clean these ovens. So that's the eitzah what to do.
Just a caution. What happened to?
Don't crack your top.
If you put a blech or you put
don't put a blech on top.
They will explode.
Yeah. Don't put a blech on top of the glass oven tops.
I've heard people who would do hagala on the glass top and it breaks.
Yeah. You have to be very careful to do hagala because it's just change from cold to heat that makes it crack. If you have the flames ongoing and it's hot, chances are it won't crack if you do hagala. But you don't have to do that. We're doing a liban kal here. You leave it running, that'll burn out the places around, so there you'll be yoitz according to the shittas, and then you can use your top for Pesach.